Ahem. Hi, everyone. I'm not going to put up any bells or whistles or anything like that. This is a chat, a one-way chat. And so I thought about some things that I do in my vocation. And so I thought about marriage counseling, and I've been thinking about this for a number of years. One of my the most popular video that I ever put up, or at least the most viewed, I don't know if it's popular, was about Adam Coble and his indiscretion, his abuse. Your perspective may differ from mine, of his players. He was running a game online, tons of experience, has written rules. Certainly people would call him kind of a social justice warrior. At least at the time, he seemed to be that way. And he had an incident where he, as the GM, imposed a rape scene of a robot character, and it basically ended his online career. I, being a fan, was, outraged. And it's funny because I did a video that said why I was outraged and talked about red cards and X cards and all that stuff, and how he should have been aware of the cues. But that video is hardly watched. But my other video, when I say, when do we let him out of the doghouse? Because in that argument, I was like saying, should we impose restrictions on people who have indiscretions forever? And that has, I don't know how many thousand views, but it boggles my mind considering that most of the time I get like maybe 40 or 50 views if I'm really, really lucky. But this is important to me because it's part of the discourse. I have had a real issue with safety tools. I have a real issue with safety tools. And one of the reasons I have an issue is because as a old-time GM, and you're probably turning off right away, is that back in the day, and it's not today, and our generation and the current generation is not the same as my generation. We had, in many ways, more respect for each other. Even within politics, it wasn't as nasty as you see now. And that we see in the media all the time affects the way we converse with one another. But marriage counseling has been around forever in different forms and different ways, as people have tried to address how do we speak with one another and how do people sometimes talk to each other. D&D is a social game. Whether it's D&D, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, whatever, all these different letters, colors, and all that stuff. Whether it's that, whether it's Cthulhu, whether it's an indie publication, whether it's one of these back there, whatever it is, and whatever you do, it is a social game. If you wanted to play alone or in a different way, like I used to be a raider in WoW, definitely a social contract. I ended up leaving a guild, actually leaving a guild, because the person in charge of the guild master, was a jerk and an ass and treated women with total disrespect. We were doing 40-man raids. It became so bad that it was better to leave. That's a different game than playing online or playing around a table. When you're online, it is different. I have a lot of Zoom meetings. I have a Zoom meeting this afternoon. And I know that it's not the same, even though you can see me and you see my gyrations and all that stuff and the tone of my voice. It's not the same as being in a room with somebody where you actually can get subtle cues that you can't just get in a 2D plane. And my argument is that when we start to impose safety tools even in the games themselves, and I'm sure that 5.5 is going to have them in them. Ironsworn or Starforged has them in them. I have strong opinions about that, and I've just kept my mouth shut because it's kind of a losing battle. People feel that they must have these tools to help. And I understand the intent is to aid people in their in trust issues, right? Because that's essentially what it is. It's a matter of trust. Now, people online, you don't know probably most of the people you're playing with. And therefore, there does need to be some type of communication beforehand, a game zero or session zero, to kind of gauge if this is the right mix for you. And maybe the first session should be about goals and about what the expectation is. What do you want to see? And see if you all get along. Now, sometimes you'll go to a gaming store, and as COVID restrictions lift, you'll be, hey, I want to go to a game store. I want to play with people that I don't know. That actually is how I got back into playing D&D and playing 5th. Back about 7 or 8 years, and it's one of those images that I put up in the opening scene, as it were. These are friends that I didn't know beforehand. These were people that I became friends with because of the table, because of the tabletop RPG experience. Now, that again requires some sensibilities and understanding. Most of us, though, play with our friends, play with our wives, our partners, our spouses, our whatever, our sexual partners. Whoever we're playing with, most of the time these are people that we know. And in those cases, there should be a level of respect that's already established, and safety tools might not necessarily be needed. Now, if I were to say to you that marriage is excellent, you get together, you get married, you put a ring on, you get a commitment, and then everything just goes along nicely for 60, 75 years. No, it doesn't work out that way. So, if our expectations of relationships lasting, and some don't have those, those values of wanting a long-term relationship. But why relationships fail is because communication has fallen down. Now, if I, as a GM or DM, am allowing my players to impose a X card or a bunch of safety tools on me, that restricts my ability to play and restricts a lot of stuff. And yet at the same time, I should know beforehand what the expectations are and trust. And there needs to be a mutual trust. When you look at Critical Role, yes, it's a business. It was set up initially as friends who had an idea about a business, and everybody else now is trying to emulate them. They have relationship, and don't tell me that they don't have issues and stuff like that. Orion was a good example of an issue that had different elements to it. But again, it was dealt with by Matt and by the crew in a way that actually honored Orion. And nobody was mudslinging back in the day. it was more the discourse amongst people like us who were fans, and we were trying to find the mud. Marriage counseling actually can help us if we understand what Gottman, who is kind of the guru of marriage counseling, specifies as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And him and his partner identify, and he's a statistician more than he's a counselor relationship type of guy. He marks down 4 issues that really identify major issues that continually come up in failed relationships. And so I'm not going to be Oprah or any of these gurus online, but I am going to refer to some texts. Now, I'm not going to put them up just because I have no clue about copyright anymore, but I want to refer to some of these things in the context of role-playing games, whether it's online or not. Now, remember, I'm coming from this from 2 directions. I'm not trying to eliminate the safety tools. That's between you and your fellow players, or you as a GM and your fellow players, or your player and your GM. You have to decide what's best. But just remember, some of these options are more problematic. And we'll see these in the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. All right, so the first is criticism. In any relationship, I know, because this is part of our discourse, certainly increasingly nowadays, but it's always been there. We attack verbally the other person's character, who they are as a person. We are critical all the time. Why are you doing that? Why have you chosen to use the bastard sword? Why aren't you using the dagger instead? It's a small corridor. Why are you using something large? You shouldn't even be able to use that. GM, why are you allowing this to be used? This is 5 foot and that sword is longer. It's criticism. And it's not just rule mongering. We're actually attacking the person's choices. And why are we imposing ourselves in that way? Criticism as a verbal attack is done all the time. We see it in media all the time. It's used in a way that just takes away a person's ability to make choices. And so criticism is like nagging. It's a constant buzz. And if you've been around the table long enough, you will have heard it time and time again. Why are you doing this? You should be doing this. You should be doing that. You could have done this. And this happens in relationships all the time. The way to amend that is to be gentle in the way that you approach. Now, I don't want to get too touchy-feely here, but recognizing that, and it can be used against you. I feel that you should have used a dagger instead of a bastard sword. Well, that's kind of contemptuous, isn't it? We're getting there. That's the next horseman. But, when you're think about the other person and allow them to fail. Criticism in many ways is a way to kind of set a person up to fail, and it also doesn't allow them to fail. It's like you're not allowing them to play their game. Criticism is a constant buzz. And it can happen with people who are more, say, alpha players, who are constantly berating and putting down. And that comes into contempt, which is the next horseman. Contempt is when you're attacking the sense of self with an intent to insult or abuse. Contempt is much stronger. Well, you always do this. You're always rolling wrong. Why can't you choose the right dice? The dice are right in front of you. How can you not tell the difference between a D8 and a D10? You're so stupid. I've heard that at the table too often between spouses. You're too stupid to know. Why are you doing this? You're so dumb. And it's not just criticism. It's beyond. It's actually really attacking the person's character, their integrity. It's every aspect, and it's an intent. Criticism is kind of less intent and more like it's a droning noise that's constant. It's part of your personality of criticizing more than it's about the other person. And oftentimes, I find in counseling that oftentimes the person who's critical actually has the exact issue that they're criticizing. Contempt is that extra step where you want to put the other person down. Again, this is something that's more to do with your own character and your own upbringing and how that has gone on in your own life. So contempt is an attack. It's a emotional, spiritual, if you want. It's a way to attack another person by just ripping apart their integrity. I think one of the problems that I see around the table and online when I watch various groups is we're not building appreciation for each other in the differences. And instead of being helpful, oh, no, it's the other dice. Oh, you pushed the wrong button. It's actually the one just underneath. And maybe leaving it to the GM to make those calls instead of players trying to intercede and take over. And maybe a GM should take on more of a role of guiding and helping and appreciating their players. Remind yourself of your group's positive qualities. See, instead of focusing on the negative qualities, shouldn't you be happy that you're around a table with people who simply want to get together and play a game of imagination with each other? Why do we turn it into rule mongering? Why do we turn it into the letter of the law? You know, the thicker the books, the more problems you're going to have with your group. The more rules you impose, the more problems you're going to have. And that's one of the reasons why D&D now 5th is not kind of my thing. I am happier with rules light games. Because the more rules we impose, the more problems we see. We see this in religion. I certainly do as a priest. We see it in different religions. It's not just Christianity who's rules-based. And so, you know, we've got issues of a lack of appreciation around the table. We should be thinking, hey, isn't it awesome that my partner wants to play with me? That my boyfriend wants to play with me, or my girlfriend wants to play here amongst these other people, and they've never played before. We're so busy criticizing and being filled with contempt that we don't get it anymore. Finding gratitude and being positive in today's society is so difficult, I feel, because Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is a little bit better because it's pictures, but think about the comments. I mean, we just berate each other. There needs to be a change in and turn off if they're just causing you such anxiety that you're becoming a critical, contemptual maniac. Maybe part of that is because all the discourse around you, maybe it's at work and you take it home, or maybe it's, you should go from the workplace to the gaming table or the gaming videos without the luggage of your past work day and bringing that crap to the table. This isn't the place. This is a place for fun, a place for imagination, a place for appreciation of people who are like-minded. So what if somebody chooses the wrong sword, and so what if the hull is 5 foot long and the bastard sword is being used? It drives me a little bit crazy, but what is it going to serve me if all I do is bitch about the room size and the weapon being used? Or the dice? And whether or not the person has chosen the right dice for maybe the 100th time they've chosen the wrong dice. Why do I feel the sense of superiority and I have to throw that in their face? So what if they're confused? They just want to play. Lighten up. But it's not just lightening up. It's about how can we build the other person's character up? And remember, the other person is going to respond in some way. And this is the other two horsemen of the apocalypse. Defensiveness. Defensiveness is a weird thing. In Gottman's words, it's a victimizing yourself to ward off a perceived attack and reverse the blame. So defensiveness is like, yeah, okay, I chose that dice. Yeah, I'm sorry. Who the frig cares? And then you're like, I'm so damn sorry. And and all of a sudden the table, the whole feeling around the table has gone from being fun to being, a fight about to take place. And then everybody is tense. I still remember being, I think in grade 5 or grade 4, and the teacher yelling at this other kid, and I just got such anxiety. It wasn't directed towards me, but I got such anxiety. Defensiveness is a way of us to kind of it's just like, well, I didn't mean to do that. Or it can also be berating. Well, I'm sorry, I'm so dumb. It's just you're building up the tension. If there's a criticism that's laid with a proper amount of restraint, and that's, I think, what's really missing in our society is restraint, we can take responsibility. Oh, yeah, okay, I know. I keep on mixing those two up, the diamond shape. I'm sorry. I'll try next time. But it's the way that the attack is made that creates a defense mechanism that kind of pushes people, and it can really be too much and overwhelming at a table or online. The fourth is a really bizarre one, and it may not be something that you've thought of. It's called stonewalling. Now, stonewalling is very typical in marriages. A criticism is laid, or a contempt is made, this psychological abuse that's laid out. And stonewalling is a complete and total withdrawal. You'll see people look away at the table when they're being spoken to. They'll withdraw if you're at home and in a marriage relationship. They'll leave the room without saying anything. They'll go somewhere else. They'll just stop talking. They'll stop conveying any type of idea. The distance and separation is massive. Stonewalling is just building this stone wall around yourself to protect yourself from further criticism and further hurt. Because ultimately, the game can be very hurtful if all we're doing is pushing each other's buttons. Now, we don't need to find out if a person has been sexually abused when they were young. Okay? And if somebody ticks that little box that says, I don't want rape to be in this game, why not? Well, that's criticism. It's also, it might be pushing buttons that don't need to be pushed. And then next thing you know, your player is like distanced and afraid because they're worried about the interaction. I've specified it, but am I going to have to use an X card? We don't want to set people up for failure. Sometimes when a person has been upset around the table, for whatever reason, it's the responsibility of the individual as well as the group to say it's okay to take a little bit of a break. You're being flooded with emotion. And sometimes we get flooded with emotion, and instead of just holding back and restraining ourselves and saying, hey, I need to go to the washroom, and you just take a breather, and that anxiety is allowed to calm down. You do some breathing exercises, and you just kind of relax and chill. There's nothing wrong. Nobody's going to question you going to the washroom. And if somebody says, are you okay? Don't become defensive. Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, stupid. We don't need that. But we also don't need to be invasive and finding out everything about an individual's backstory of their own lives. And that's why I'm worried about safety tools, is because sometimes we can go a little bit too far. I think that it's important for a one-on-one conversation between all the players and the GM. And the GM has to be a very trusted person. A person who has emotional intelligence to understand the table and read the table. That's where Adam Koebel failed. Now, whether or not he's an abuser, which is a matter that I will never know, and neither will you, unless you have a relationship with this individual. But what he did was he broke the trust, and he didn't read the room online. He was so busy with his own story, with his own imagination, with his own scene that he set up, that he lost the narrative. Most of all, he lost the room, and he lost us in the process as we became increasingly uncomfortable. Taking a break and an X card is so in your face that it also can be perceived as criticism. It can be perceived as contempt. It can be used as a defense mechanism and as defensiveness. And it can actually be used for you to change the path of the game just because you don't like the way the game is going. There are a lot of problems in our game when we start to go a little bit too far. We need to retain grace with one another and reasonable discourse. And when we see that somebody's being pushed, we need to just back off and let them be. Reading the room as a GM is one of the most important tools that you have in your arsenal. It's not how many rules you know or how many GM screens you've got in front of you or whether or not you're using Roll20 or Foundry or whatever VTT. It's about you as a person and how you interact with the people who you're trying to game with. You're not entertaining them, and they're not entertaining you. You're entertaining one another. It's a joint story that involves randomness, and randomness can be fun and it can be shocking. And you need to determine with your group the level of shock that can be involved. I've spoken about watching anime before, and I've watched Goblin Slayer. And Goblin Slayer starts off with a rape. Goblins are raping, and it really, it kind of blew your mind, and you thought to yourself, am I going to, and my wife and I were watching this, we were like, are we going to watch, are we going to continue? What are we going to do? We decided that we were going to continue to watch, and we love the series. But it's set up for how bad these goblins are. It gave us a framework of why the Goblin Slayer has to do what the Goblin Slayer is doing. And again, it's contextual. If you're trying to impose something on a player and justify it, that's a dangerous game of taking away agency. But then there's another level of where you want to have the fun, where the dice direct you in a way that's surprising. The GM should be allowed to be surprised just as much as the players. That's why we have players and why we're not playing, WoW and grinding away and grabbing flowers for 4 hours. Okay? And this is why we're not playing Assassin's Creed. Is because we want that surprise level of the interaction between people who are thinking dynamically. What are kind of the sources that we can use that aid us in the soothing and the distracting and the, in the sense of offering apology when we've hurt other people at the table? Because I think that that's important. If you've noticed something that's happened, don't be shy to apologize at the table. Oh, I'm sorry. And maybe a 5-minute break and the GM says, hey, let's take a little break and let's just grab a cup of coffee or grab some beer or grab whatever, and let's just take a little time. That's fine. Check in with each other, even if you're just looking at people's engagement. I obviously, having a phone at the table is horrific. Having a pad at the table, I believe that if you're going to play and this is my belief, you could differ in your opinion for sure, but having a device at a pen and paper game just adds to the further distractions. And I think that that's where criticism and contempt can come in as well. My wife, who will be the first to admit it, spent a long time just in between people's turns during attacks, was down looking at her phone, flipping on Facebook, and I'd get really upset at her, and I'd be really mad. Because I'd be like, after the game, I'd be like, why the hell didn't you watch? Why weren't you paying attention during the game? Why? Ah! And that's why we went to marriage counseling. And so we need to be more appreciative of the people around us. I do think that, having devices around the table and that being allowed is a distraction. If you're playing an online game, don't have Facebook off on another screen. Don't be looking at your Twitter account or one of the things that today's society, in my opinion, does a lot is if we're able to be distracted, we allow ourselves to be distracted. So if I say I'm going to go to a meeting, so I've got a meeting in an hour. If I'm going to go to this meeting and I have other things open, I'm disrespecting the people that I'm meeting with. Because if I was actually meeting physically with other people, my phone should not take priority over that meeting with people. And that's a huge deal. I'll meet with my administrator, and my administrator and I will have time in the morning to discuss the business of the day, the business of the week, the business of the month even. And the phone will ring, and my administrator will get up to answer the phone. And it drives me nuts because I see it as a disrespect of the time that we have together. And we've had to shut off the phones so that that individual doesn't feel that urge to answer, because that must be more important than what we're doing. And around the table, the only thing for those 2 hours, hour and a half, 3 hours, 4 hours even, should be being together. There is nothing else going to happen in the world that is so disastrous. And if you do, don't play. Set that time away for you and each other. Because that's how we can get into the critical, contemptual, defensive, and stonewalling patterns is by just saying other things are more important. Yeah, I'm here, but I'm waiting for this email, I'm waiting for this phone call, I'm waiting for this. All you're saying to each other is, something else is more important than you, and if I can do it, I will. That's like going out on a date and, taking a call, or going out on a date and looking at your phone and your Instagram account on the date while you wait for the food to arrive. No communication, no interaction. These safety tools are basically trying to mitigate human nature. And we, as people who have a propensity to get distracted, need to find ways to calm down and distract from the noise. The last things are kind of, how to impose, create a safe, happy, comfortable environment. And not all of these things apply necessarily to the table, but I think with some imagination you can. Create shared meaning. In a relationship, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your values? Do you have shared values? And remember, not everyone ever in any relationship is going to have the same values. It's near impossible. So you've got to listen to those values. And that's why I think a session 0 is good, because you're able to kind of talk with each other. And I really do believe that there should be kind of session 0A and session 0B. Talk to your GM first about what your hopes are and see if they jive. And if they jive, great, move to the next step. If they don't jive, rinse and repeat until you find somebody that does. Okay? Also, with a session 0B, it should be where everybody gets together and you all share what you've already spoken about with the GM, so that everybody is kind of on the same page. Oh, I want to play a superhero game. Oh, but I want to play an anime game. Well, it's the same thing. Well, no, it's not. Well, yes, it is. Okay, well, I'll try it out. And then you find out after session 3 or 4 that no, it's a superhero game and you're not happy. Well, get on, and give and take. Everything in our world is black and white. So, I don't like this because such and such is doing this on Spotify, or such and such is doing this on Amazon, or such and such is doing this with Walmart. And then it's like, I don't want to be a part of that. Okay, that's fair, I guess. But when you start doing that beyond, and you start imposing those same type of values on corporations that you do on individuals, we're not allowing people to be dynamic. We're just putting them in a box and saying, okay, this is what you are. And there is a problem, I think, in gaming where we're trying to make goblins out to be good people. There are games that we should be able to play where the goblin's just a nasty son of a bitch. And we want to kill them because they're just bad to the core. And that it's a venting. Playing a role-playing game is a venting experience. It should be cathartic. It should be filled with hubris even. Learn something about yourself. Learn something about the world. Let it be political and let it be, to a certain extent, black and white. But don't make your group and identify your group members as either good or bad. They're good player, they're bad player. No, they're just a player who wants to have fun. And some groups don't always need to stay going on forever. Make dreams come true. Well, that's a nice marriage thing. Have a goal, plan, make it come about. My wife and I hope to go to Europe someday together. I've been, my wife hasn't. We'd like to go together. We need to kind of plan and have those goals. Well, in D&D or role-playing games, our goals are to level up, and we want to help each other level up. I am a little bit obsessed with some animes, and that's because I see that everybody is working together to help each other. Now, my son got me into One Piece. Oh my gosh. So the first 10 episodes were like, why am I doing this to myself? It's so kid-like. And then I got the subtleties. And now I'm on 170. And I realize why it is such a seminal anime and why it's gone on for 22, 23 years, something like that. I understand because they are working together. They're individuals, Luffy and Sanchi and all of them. Sorry, my brain's going. Roanoa Zoro and Nanny, and I think I mentioned Nanny, but she's kind of hot. What's her name? Robin. All of these characters are building each other up. Usopp is like so useless, and yet he's part of the team. And that anime themes, those themes are applied in Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer? Yeah. It goes on and goes on in different animes. You see this cooperation and this lifting up. There's a dream, and the dream needs to be accomplished. So Sanchi wants to go to the Grand Blue. I don't know. I'm only on episode 170. Luffy wants to be the king of the pirates. Every time, Nanny wants to make money. That's their goals. These are their goals. And they build each other up as individuals, but together. And if you look at the other pirates, the pirates are all very much, there's a head, and then there's the minions. And if the minions don't do what the head does, the head is going to get mad. Well, some D&D groups are exactly the same way. I know I'm using D&D as the kind of, bucket of role-playing games, but I hope you appreciate what I mean for the sense of not having to go through this time and time again. Manage conflict. Accept the group and accept other individuals around the table for being different, and dialogue about the problems that you might encounter after the game. Don't do it during the game. Try as hard as you can. When the person is choosing the wrong dice and stuff like that, don't belittle the person. We don't have to make commentary about everything in our lives. Practice self-soothing. And that's what I meant by kind of retreating back, not in a stonewalling way where you just shut down and you shut up because you're mad at the other person and you just, that's it. I'm not going to play anymore. I'm just going to sit here and stew for the next hour. And when it's my turn, I'll grab the damn dice and I'll throw them down. I'll say, fuck it. Hey, I'm just going to play. I've seen that too often, actually. And it's so sad because everybody else feels the tension. And then it's like, Why do I want to play next week? I don't want to play. Oh, I'm so worried about the tension of the group. Your group should be fun for you, for your friends, for the group that you're with. It should be, and if you're doing something because you're a professional, if you're watching me and you're a professional who's trying to do this stuff for a living, I'm very honored. But if you are doing it as a professional trying to make money, remember to read your audience who's out there watching you, and remember that you don't want them to feel like shit in the middle of a session because someone was an ass, or because worse, you were an ass and you made fun of them, or you criticized them, or you laid contempt on them, or they stonewalled you because in the past you've been so negative toward them. It moves on to a turn toward instead of away, and this is a way to avoid stonewalling. Is be aware of the group. Again, I know that I keep on repeating this, but being aware of the dynamics is emotional intelligence. It's understanding that, instead of just kind of putting up your hands and saying, well, I got to teach my players a lesson, or I've got to teach my GM a lesson because I know more rules than she does, or he does, or they do. Don't just... No, turn towards each other, appreciate, regard each other. There's this great phrase in Hosea, if you're a Christian or Jewish, in the Hebrew Scriptures, that he talks about his whoring wife, and he says, as an analogy to God, wooing back his wife who's gone a whoring. And of course, this analogy of God wooing back the people who have gone to other gods. I will woo the person. We've lost this sense of wooing in even our regular relationships, like building people up. That's essentially what it is. Allowing people to fall in love with you again, or in like with you again. We don't do enough of that in the role-playing world, is really trying to show that we're capable of change as individuals. That's what makes us human, is we're capable of change, whereas Assassin's Creed ain't capable of change. You have some options, but it is what it is, and you make the choice, and that's why you play the PS5 and the Xbox, whatever number it's on now. And, that's why you do, or you play on your computer. You do things on the computer without other people, or maybe with other people, but you're doing it knowing that there are going to be certain directions. Whereas a role-playing game has so many, the variables are insane, and therefore the conflict possibilities are also insane, in-game and out of game. So we need to turn toward each other. Sharing fondness and admiration is just kind of a step up from turning toward each other. Fondness, just appreciating the table, appreciating the people who've logged on and are spending time with you. It cannot be understated. And admiration... Maybe your GM is new to the game, has fallen in love with RPGs, and just wants to try. And because they're insecure, because they don't know the rules, maybe they're dyslexic and they don't know it. Maybe they're ADHD and they've got 60 billion rules under the sun in their heads, but they feel insecure because they've got so many books behind them that they're trying to grab information from, that they've become overwhelmed, but all they want to do is play, and it's Monday night and you've got game night, or it's Friday and you're online and the person's come on and they're nervous because they have people that they're still learning from and learning about, and then all of a sudden you crap on them because they don't know everything yet. And will they ever? Will we ever? No. So just have fun. The last one is building love maps. Know one another's world. Well, in marriage, I understand that. Know one another's world. Know what makes each other tick. This is why I think a session 0A, GM individual, and 0B with the group are essential. If you get those two elements in place and you talk about the possibilities of criticism and how to be aware of it, and if you have something that's negative to say, be gentle. If you see people who are contemptuous around your table, particularly couples who have issues that maybe need marriage counseling, try to be appreciative of each of those people. And maybe if you notice this in your own relationship around the gaming table or in your own relationship in your life, maybe you and your partner need to have some help in conversing with one another. Don't just say, you need therapy. No, we all need therapy. And if you are a person of faith, you may trust your spiritual leader, whatever faith that may be. You should go to a professional who is a therapist, a trained therapist with a good reputation. Don't just... This is not always the best way of interacting with therapy. So, go to somebody who's accredited, who's broad in their spectrum and understanding, and who's not going to take sides. You don't go to therapy and you don't employ these things so that you're taking a side. That's what mutual appreciation and building love maps or friend maps is all about. Know one another's world. Know what values they have. Appreciate the differences. These are things that I think some intuitively have and others can learn. In, whatever you think of IQ tests, and they are certainly flawed, people kind of stay within the same range, depending on the test and depending on its flaws, because all IQ tests have a certain bias. That's education for you, okay? But in emotional intelligence, it's an intelligence that we can learn. We actually can learn how to appreciate each other and how to value one another, and also how to express ourselves, but in a way that is not expressing criticism in a way that's attacking a person's character or personality, or being contemptuous where we're intentionally trying to destroy or abuse a person's character. We can learn how to address our own faults because, and let's face it, I'm a big supporter of systems theory, because we get the way we interact with each other in groups and settings by our parents or the people who raised us. That's why we are the people that we are, is because we've sucked it up like a sponge and then we've spit it out, and most of the time it's vitriol and it's not positive. Some people have positive frameworks as they grew up. I certainly did, but my parents were extremely dysfunctional, and I am a product of dysfunction. And being aware of that can help you see how you're treating another person at the table or on the screen. Because you're like looking at them and you're saying, in your mind, in the back of your mind, you're not aware of this, oh, that person reminds me of Aunt Betty, and Aunt Betty was a real bitch. Or this person reminds me of my father, and my father abused me. Or this person reminds me of, my pastor, or who was abusive. Or this person reminds me of my sister or my brother or whoever who was kind and nice, and so I'm more attracted to them as a person And once we're aware of kind of who we're seeing each other as a role-playing group, the better we're going to be as players, because it's not just sitting around a table with a book in your hand and a bunch of dice and a paper and pencil and just playing. Yes, that's our hope, but we're people, and we're people who impose our values and our systems of relationship. So try to woo the people at your table, whether you are a GM, whether you have tons of experience, whether you have no experience. Hopefully, you can go into a setting where you trust each other. And that trust should come once you've met with your GM and once you've met with your group. And once that's established, if everybody can kind of get on the same communication page, and you're aware of your own personal pitfalls and knowing that maybe you need to withdraw at certain times without putting up an X card, or I can't do this anymore, this is just stupid, I can't do this because this is upsetting me, because we can be easily upset in today's society. And my gosh, boy, do we get upset. I watch a lot of soccer. Football is what it's called. I watch a lot of football. And when I watch football and I see certain players rolling around on the ground because they kind of got a little bit of a knock, it drives me nuts. It's one of the reasons why North Americans don't usually follow football, is because it's like, they're only touched. If that was a linebacker, they'd be, Look, some injuries are real injuries, some injuries aren't. But around the table for playing a tabletop role-playing game, I worry that some safety tools and some X cards are very much like that soccer player that kind of is in our image, where they get a little knock and they're like, my arm! I think in One Piece you'd compare it to Usopp or Chopper. They're constantly worried. Anyway, this video's gone on for almost an hour. If you've watched this long, well, good for you. It's just a chat about how I believe we can apply different systems that work in the world in kind of part of my job. And how we can apply things that are out in the world about relationship building and bring it into the game without having to over dictate or over control. And safety tools, and now that safety tools are being written into games, mark my words, the industry is going to suffer, because people are going to stop playing because they're going to say, I don't want to go through all this hassle of having to, check off box and box and box. I feel like I'm going into a doctor's office or a psychiatrist's office. This is a dangerous game that the industry is playing. I'm really worried about what it's going to do for the industry as a whole. We think that we're doing the right thing. I think that we need to take a different approach. I would much rather woo people in by talking about things like this that I've just spent an hour talking about, rather than imposing systems that are to protect. Start appreciating each other. And, if you're a conservative person and you're playing at a table with a very liberal person, whatever that looks like to you, let's say you are a Bible-believing, I don't believe that gays and lesbians should have relationships type person, and you're a person who's in a committed or even a not committed, lesbian or gay relationship, you're playing a game, guys. It shouldn't matter what those values are in the game. And you shouldn't try to impose yourself on others. I have pretty strong opinions as an individual about openness. But I don't, there's certain places where it's appropriate and other places where it's not appropriate. I don't think the gaming table is the place for us to start telling people how they should live their lives. That's criticism, and that's not going to get you anywhere or them anywhere. They're not here to listen to you go on about what you believe or what you don't believe. The only thing that matters is, what do you believe about this world? What do you want to see happen? Like, how do you want this world to expand? And have this talk with the GM individually without anyone else around so that you can be open and honest, and then have another group session where everybody's together and you discuss things. And then if everybody's still on board and the GM says, is everybody comfortable? Then you say, can we make characters now? And then you go for it. And hopefully, with all of that discussion and all of this kind of approach of recognizing and honoring each other's differences and different values, then you'll have a much better experience at your table. Take care, have fun, have a great time playing, and I hope that in some way this has been helpful, appropriate. Mention in the comments and like and subscribe and all that stuff. But it's just kind of a gift that I thought of to the community to say, there's other ways that you can kind of look at relationship building around the table that doesn't necessarily need hard, aggressive interrupts. Take care.